We begin tonight with the connection between two stories that we never, ever in a million years thought we would be connecting. The first story is what's going on in Wisconsin, where 68,000 people turned out to protest over the weekend at the state capitol, and thousands more gathered today. Day 7 of these remarkable protests. That's story number 1. Story number 2 is... fair warning, a story about which we tend to get aggrieved blog comments and voicemails from my mom whenever we show these pictures. But there's no other way to explain the story without showing these pictures. Oh yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, the few, the proud, the Wackenhut. A private security company that our tax dollars have been paying to guard the U.S. Embassy in Kabul. They're still there, actually, still getting paid to guard the U.S. Embassy in Kabul 17 months after these pictures of them at work surfaced. These pictures, which as you can see, show American defense contractors simulating sex, posing semi-nude, wearing coconut brassieres, and shooting vodka out of each other's hindquarters. These guys worked for a subsidiary of the firm Wackenhut while they were doing this, teaching the world that it's possible to drink vodka out of places nobody had any idea you could or should drink vodka out of before. The connection between what's going on in Wisconsin and what went on in Kabul with those guys' pants off is that what the governor of Wisconsin is doing right now, he has tried before. The governor of Wisconsin, who has thrown his state into chaos by trying to strip union rights from people who work for that state, he has tried this before with disastrous results and with Wackenhut. This is the Milwaukee County Courthouse. As you can see, it is a very pretty building. When Scott Walker was in charge in Milwaukee, he decided to fire the security guards who worked at the courthouse and at 2 other county buildings. They were public employees, they were represented by a union, and Scott Walker just fired them. Now, the county board was opposed to that. They rejected his plan. But then after he was blocked by the county board, Mr. Walker just unilaterally insisted that he could do it anyway. He just seized the power to do it, claiming he had the right because there was a budget emergency. And so all of those union security guards got fired, and Scott Walker replaced them with the Butt Vodka Company guys. He replaced them with Wackenhut, with a private company called G4S Wackenhut, which is based in the UK and which uses, naturally, non-union security guards. Mr. Walker fired all of the union guards and replaced them with private non-union guards. This was like the dress rehearsal for what Scott Walker is doing at the state level right now, and it may offer a little bit of foreshadowing as to how this is all going to work out. An arbitrator in Wisconsin ruled just last month that the so-called budget emergency that Scott Walker used to justify hiring the Butt Vodka Company guys by decree, doing it unilaterally, that justification was essentially ginned up. Quote, the county did not have a true budget crisis at the time, according to the decision from the arbitrator. It's true that the county was facing a budget shortfall, but again, according to this arbitrator, not a big enough one to justify Mr. Walker's hair on fire, it's an emergency, I can do what I want actions. Also, firing all of those union guards did not turn out to save the money that Mr. Walker said it was going to save. Since Scott Walker hired the coconut bra vodka guys, the county has since had to revise down, way down, how much money that would save. Turns out they overguessed by more than $330,000. But wait, there's more.
An arbitrator just ruled Walker overstepped his authority, and now the county must give those guards their jobs back and provide back pay.
Scott Walker's last big cost-saving bust-the-union stunt could ultimately end up costing his former employer, Milwaukee County, close to $500,000 after all is said and done. And, you may be shocked to learn, turns out the coconut brassiere drinking vodka out of your friend's orifices company didn't do that great a job for the people of Wisconsin once Scott Walker gave them those used-to-be public, used-to-be union jobs. The man Wackenhut installed as the security chief for all of the locations where all of the union guards had been fired was a man with a criminal record that included jail time. That's who they picked for their security chief. So the last time Scott Walker did something like this, in his desperation to get rid of employees who joined unions, he improperly fired them, he overstated how much money that would save, and then he allowed for a private, foreign-based Butt Vodka Company to put a convicted criminal in charge of security at the Milwaukee Courthouse and City Hall. Woohoo! That's Wisconsin's new governor. That's where he comes from. The playbook here is clear. The priority is to get rid of the unions, to break them up. The pretext to do that is financial, but it is clear that it is just a pretext. The unions at the center of this fight offered to the governor. They said they would essentially give him all the financial concessions he said he wanted, but he said no to that. He doesn't want those financial concessions. He wants to strip them of their union rights, or he wants nothing. Finances are just a pretext. Among the most expensive benefit package the state pays for any union employees are the ones for the unions that supported Mr. Walker when he ran for governor. Those also happen to be the only ones who are exempted from his union stripping plan. If this really was about money, those ones would be the first ones on the chopping block. But it is not all about money. Finances are just a pretext. In the midst of this supposed budget deficit emergency that makes necessary this dramatic anti-union bill, the governor supported adding about $140 million to the state's deficit when he passed a bunch of tax cuts without paying for them. Finances are just a pretext. When Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey announces that he needs to do the same thing because of his budget crisis, he's expected to announce that tomorrow. And when Governor John Kasich of Ohio moves to do the same thing in his state because of his budget crisis, it will be a pretext in those places too. Republicans understand that the business interests that support them have always wanted to get rid of unions, as it has always been and as it will always be. But more directly, Republicans understand sources of Democratic political power, and they understand sources of Democratic political power well enough to be focused across the country on how they can destroy those institutions. Corporations, broadly speaking, support Republicans. In the last election cycle, Chamber of Commerce made donations that were 93% Republican. But the people who cash paychecks instead of sign them, the people who work for companies instead of own those companies, actual humans instead of conglomerates, labor unions, those groups, broadly speaking, do tend to support Democratic causes. Here, again, are the top 10 big money contributors in last year's elections. 7 of the top 10 are right-wing. The only 3 that are not are, ding, 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 unions. Republicans understand enough about the sources of Democratic political power to want to destroy the institutions that make it possible for Democrats to compete in elections. The question is whether or not Democrats understand the sources of their political power well enough to defend those institutions against Republican attacks. Republicans, ideologically speaking, like to talk smack about the government, right? Government is the problem.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Government is the problem. That's always the great awkwardness at the heart of Republicans campaigning for political office. If you don't like government so much, if you think that government is the problem, why do you want to be in charge of it? But there are 2 things that Republicans really like about having government power. One is the opportunity to hive off things that the government does and give them to private companies to be done for profit instead. Hello, you there in the coconut bra. The other thing they have a real passion for is using public policy to attack and dismantle institutions that support Democrats electorally. So just in case it wasn't crystal clear enough that that's what's going on in Wisconsin, that's what explains why 70,000 people were in the streets of Madison this weekend. Just in case it wasn't clear enough, when the Republicans in Wisconsin announced today what they're going to do while the Democrats are gone, while the Democrats are out of state, denying the Senate the quorum it needs to vote on this union busting thing, guess what the Republicans are going to do while the Democrats are away? Guess what they're going to do next? It is a bill to make it harder to register to vote in Wisconsin. You know, weirdly, we used this last week as an example of the kinds of issues that Republicans do this on. As an example of the way Republicans use public policy for partisan ends to benefit their own party and hurt Democrats. Registering new voters has long been a great source of Democratic electoral strength. Why is that? Because young voters and people who haven't voted before do tend to vote Democratic. So if Republicans can make it really hard to register to vote, they can take away one of the ways that Democrats win in elections. If you make it harder to register to vote, you make it harder for Democrats to win elections. Republicans understand what institutions help Democrats win elections, and they are using public policy to dismantle those things for partisan purposes. So while they are waiting to destroy the unions in, say, Wisconsin, in the meantime, while they're waiting to do that, they will use their time to destroy voter registration drives. Republicans understand Democrats well enough to know what to attack in order to weaken Democrats. The question now is, do Democrats understand their own institutions and their own strengths well enough to know that they ought to be defending them.